In the headlines on Early Edition at 6, a special parliamentary bill designed to set up an investigation into April's ferry disaster falls back into deadlock after the bereaved families reject an agreement made by the main rival parties. An Islamic militant group says it has beheaded an American journalist who went missing in 2012. U.S. officials work to confirm the authenticity of the video that claims to show the execution. And Korea's army chief vows to root out violence such as sexual harassment and physical abuse in the military. He says any unit that perpetuates the problem will be dismantled. These stories and more coming right up at Early Edition at 6. It's 6 in the evening on Wednesday, August 20th, here in Korea. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Na Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Chen. Thank you for joining us for Early Edition at 6. We begin at the National Assembly tonight, where another layer of complications has been added to a special legislation that would set up an investigation into April's ferry sinking.
Around this time yesterday, Korea's two rival parties were able to find common ground on the specifics of that bill, but family members of the victims have rejected the agreement.
And the bill is now back into a deadlock. Our Kwon Soa has our top story.
The deal struck on Tuesday by the country's two main parties on the special Sewol-ho ferry bill will likely need to be tweaked. After the bereaved families rejected the bill, members of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy held a meeting and concluded the bill cannot be passed without the families' consent.
We still have a process ahead of us until the agreement is complete. We have to gain consent from the families of the victims and the public. In that regard, the ruling Saenuri Party needs to show more effort and responsibility in dealing with this issue.
The Saenuri Party said further renegotiations are not possible at this moment, and the party's chairman Kim Moo-sung said Wednesday that the priority has now shifted to passing pending economic bills.
The National Assembly is currently stuck in this Sewol-ho black hole, making it impossible to pass any bills related to enhancing the livelihoods of the people. Due to the deadlock over the Sewol-ho bill, the window on the golden time to revitalize the economy is closing.
The representatives of the victims' families will gather for a meeting Wednesday evening and provide an official statement. The families were dissatisfied with Tuesday's bipartisan agreement that would have allowed the Saenuri Party to select 2 of the 7 members of a panel that would have set up a special council to investigate the causes of the ferry disaster. Kwon Soa, Arirang News.
Now, the latest defense activities coming out of Japan suggest that the country is shoring up support for the military at home. This comes despite Korea's continuous warnings that anything related to the security of the Korean peninsula requires Seoul's approval first. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
80 battle tanks, 60 military aircraft, and 2,300 troops pound the foothills of Mount Fuji amid thousands of spectators. This is part of annual live fire exercises for Japan's self-defense forces on Monday, a public display of the tactics and equipment that are used to defend Japanese territory.
They are great. These are the elite troops who will protect Japan, and I'm very glad they are on our side, not our enemies.
With all the fuss over China, Japan should have the equipment it needs, and I think it is the first step to building up deterrence.
While the crowd applauds Japan's expanding military role, it is a source of concern for neighboring countries like South Korea, a victim of Japan's militaristic past. Fearing the buildup, Seoul has repeatedly stressed that Japan must get its explicit consent on matters related to South Korea's security and interests. But Tokyo may already be in talks with Washington on countermeasures against such scenarios. According to the Japanese daily Yomiuri Shimbun Wednesday, the Japanese government plans to revise its defense treaty with the United States so it can provide weapons and ammunition to U.S. forces and air-to-air refueling for U.S. aircraft in the event of a security crisis on the Korean peninsula. The report said these will be part of the Japanese government's assistance for Washington and added the two sides are in their final stages of talks. Incheon Arirang News.
Now, it probably isn't an overstatement to say that historical differences have driven a sizable wedge between Korea and Japan. President Park Geun-hye has yet to sit down for summit talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and a Korean diplomat says bilateral relations will likely remain at a standstill unless Japan owns up to its past wrongdoings. Our Foreign Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
South Korean ambassador to the United States An Ho-young says it's basic common sense that Japan should apologize for its wartime atrocities before bilateral summit talks occur between the nation's leaders. In a keynote speech at a seminar in Washington on Tuesday, An said Seoul would elevate its relations with Tokyo only when it's ready to acknowledge the past as it is. The diplomat said such action was necessary to ensure that a summit between the two leaders leads to improved ties. Relations between Korea and Japan have hit a new low in recent years as the Abe administration continues to distort historical facts. President Park Geun-hye refuses to sit down with their Japanese counterpart until he apologizes for Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women in early 20th century. The two leaders have not held a bilateral summit since either took office. Japan understands that settling the sexual slavery issue is key to cooling tensions with Korea, according to a senior foreign ministry official in Seoul. He told reporters Tuesday that the Korean and Japanese foreign ministers agreed in Myanmar earlier this month on the need for progress in their monthly high-level talks aimed at resolving the sex slavery issue. As for the past 3 rounds of talks that were held, the senior diplomat made clear that it's too early to talk about whether any progress is being made. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The recent string of bullying incidents in the Korean military demand action, and the Army's Chief of Staff has vowed to take it. He is determined to reform the military as a flood of new abuse allegations emerge. Arirang's Kim Hyun-bin has more.
Investigations are underway into dozens of newly reported cases of sexual harassment and physical abuse at military barracks around the country, in the wake of a series of similar cases that have left the nation shaken, including the death of an Army private who was beaten to death by his superiors in April. More cases are coming to light. Army Chief of Staff General Kim Yo-han likened violence in the barracks to treason and said operations to root it out would soon begin. The general says strong measures will be taken, including the dismantling of units that failed to improve their situations. According to an Army official, a total of 758 cases were reported through military hotlines this month alone. That's an increase of 26% compared to the previous month. 3 cases in the eastern border town of Hwacheon are among those under investigation. Suspects there allegedly sexually molested 7 of their subordinates numerous times during April and May. In a different incident, an Army corporal is suspected of beating 2 of his subordinates and stuffing flies into their mouths. Most of the suspects defended their actions, saying they did it for fun or as an expression of friendliness. To better prevent such incidents, the Army has decided to strengthen military education and boost patrol and inspections in all units throughout the country. All able-bodied men are subject to 2 years of mandatory military service in South Korea. There are currently over 650,000 active servicemen in the country. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, the 2014 Asian Games are set to kick off in the South Korean port city of Incheon in less than a month. A delegation from North Korea's Olympic Committee arrived in South Korea late Tuesday for some pre-Games functions. The group is comprised of 8 North Korean officials. One of them is Yang Sung-ho, the president of the Korean University of Physical Education in Pyongyang. After arriving from Beijing, the officials greeted waiting reporters with smiles, but refused to answer any questions. During his stay, Yang will give a keynote speech and a presentation at a pre-Games event on Wednesday. The delegation will also tour the main stadium and the athletes' village before leaving on Friday. Around 150 North Korean athletes will take part in the Incheon Asian Games, which run from September 19th through October 4th. So nearly 10,000 athletes from dozens of Asian countries will be battling it out in Incheon next month in the 17th Asian Games. And our Song Ji-sun tells us what to expect as well as how many medals Team Korea aims to grab.
Preparations are complete. The venues are ready, and the villages for the athletes and media are set to open their doors on September 5th. The torch is on its way as well. It's traveling through Gyeonggi-do province on Wednesday with stops in the cities of Ansan and Suwon. It's the third time Korea is playing host to Asia's biggest sporting event, and the home field advantage has Korean athletes feeling confident. The team's goal is to earn at least 90 gold medals and place second overall after China. The Korean baseball team, which has won the Asian Games a total of 3 times, including 4 years ago in Gwangju, is considered a favorite.
Gold, gold, gold is the only word on our minds. But we're keeping a close eye on Japan, Taiwan, and China, as they have improved over the past few years as well.
A total of 439 golds in 36 sports will be up for grabs at this international event, during which nearly 10,000 athletes from 45 different countries will compete. 150 of the participants will come from North Korea. A delegation from the North Olympic Committee is currently in the South to participate in the group draws on Thursday for 10 different sports, including basketball, volleyball, and football. North Korea has placed first in women's football twice before and are the favorites to win in Incheon. Team North Korea's goal overall is finishing in the top 10, something they've accomplished when the games were held in the South Korean port city of Busan 12 years ago. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Face a one-day entry ban. 77.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
For months now, the Korean government has been on its toes, sounding the alarm about the nation's sluggish economic growth. They formed a new team and introduced stimulus measures to provide a spark. And a new survey now shows that the economic community, by and large, approves of the new team's policies. Our economics correspondent Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The new economic team led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has received a passing grade for boosting the domestic economy, at least according to the 37 economic experts recently surveyed by the Federation of Korean Industries. More than half of the respondents said the set of government stimulus measures proposed are sufficient for propping up the ailing economy. Just around 15% of them thought they were not. The experts surveyed also said that government measures should focus on boosting domestic demand by removing excessive regulations and running an expansionary fiscal and financial policy. While around half of the experts expressed concerns about the Korean economy falling into a low-growth trap that resembles that of Japan, the other half were more optimistic, saying the domestic economy is on a recovery track, but that the momentum has slowed because of the ferry disaster in April. They cited the sluggish real estate market, mounting household debt, and worsening consumer and business sentiment due to the ferry tragedy as the biggest challenges currently facing the economy. As for the long-term problems, the experts pointed to the absence of new growth engines, slumping private consumption and investment, the low birth rate, and Korea's aging population. The majority of the experts expect that domestic demand will return to the level seen just before the April ferry disaster if the government measures are implemented as planned. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics is expanding its business portfolio. Samsung said Tuesday it had acquired a 100% stake in QuietSide, a U.S.-based retailer for air conditioners, but declined to give details, including the price. Samsung last week purchased U.S.-based platform developer SmartThings, and that's a company that develops applications that monitor, control, and automate devices at home. Now, both acquisitions are seen as part of Samsung's efforts to make inroads into the North American smart home market. It's also said to be about diversifying its sources of profit as Samsung's dominance in the smartphone industry has waned in the face of growing competition. And Korea is becoming the #1 tourist destination for Chinese visitors, and with that, their spending is also expected to make a huge increase over the next 5 years or so. The Korea Tourism Organization and Hana Taetu Securities estimate Chinese tourists will spend over $30 billion in Korea in the year 2020, a near 5-fold increase compared to last year. They also say the number of Chinese tourists will increase by nearly 20% every year through 2020 to reach 15 million in that year. Chinese money spent in duty-free shops, which takes up one of the largest portions in their spending, is expected to reach $9 billion in 2020, a 9-fold jump from last year.
On a more grim note, Islamic State militants claim they have beheaded an American journalist who went missing in Syria nearly 2 years ago. Before being killed, the journalist, apparently coerced by his captors, blames the U.S. government for his impending death. Our Connie Lee reports.
In a video released Tuesday by the Islamic State militants, it purportedly shows U.S. independent journalist James Foley being beheaded. The 39-year-old is seen wearing orange and on his knees, next to a gunman dressed in all black. The video, titled A Message to America, first starts off with a speech by President Barack Obama announcing that the U.S. military will begin targeted airstrikes in Iraq against the Islamic State, otherwise known as ISIS. The ordered airstrikes in the country was to help the Iraqi security force take on the militants who were gaining ground and killing thousands. The video then shows Foley reciting a statement, presumably forced by his captors, that his real killer is America. Soon after, Foley is killed. The video continues, showing another U.S. journalist named Steven Sotloff, with the gunmen threatening to kill him too, saying that the life of this American citizen depends on the actions of President Obama. The authenticity of the video is currently being verified. A spokesperson for the White House National Security Council released a statement saying that the U.S. intelligence community is working as quickly as possible to determine the authenticity of the video. If genuine, we are appalled by the brutal murder of an innocent American journalist, and we express our deepest condolences to his family and friends. Foley has been reporting in the Middle East for the past 5 years until he disappeared while in northwest Syria back in November 2012. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Moving on to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, Liberia, the worst-hit country, has enacted a curfew to minimize the movement. All movement would be blocked in and out of the West Point slum, where a quarantine center was attacked this past weekend. Our Connie Kim has this story.
In a bid to stem the Ebola outbreak in Liberia, the nation's president has declared a nighttime curfew and ordered security forces to quarantine a slum that's home to at least 50,000 people. The new quarantine areas include Monrovia's West Point slum and all entertainment centers. The new measures come as there was a glimmer of hope in the fight against the outbreak, as infected healthcare workers in Liberia are reported to be showing remarkable signs of improvement after taking the experimental drug ZMapp. The three are the first Africans to receive the treatment. ZMapp was first given to 2 U.S. aid workers and a priest earlier this month. The UN Health Agency says it's only made between 10 to 12 doses of the drug available, and the most recent shipment went to Liberia. Meanwhile, Liberia has confirmed that all 17 suspected Ebola patients who fled their quarantine center when it was looted last weekend have been accounted for.
Their sudden disappearance sparked fears a deadly virus could spread into the densely populated slum around it. People have turned themselves in and have been transferred to another clinic. It's not yet known whether any of them actually have Ebola. Latest figures from the WHO show Liberia registered the most new Ebola deaths over a 3-day period in the latter half of last week, with 53. The overall death toll observed in Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria has now topped the 1,200 mark. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Moving on to a different story, 31 people were arrested in yet another night of demonstrations in the U.S. state of Missouri that ended in chaos. A local official says a tiny minority of lawbreakers hailing from as far away as New York and California had instigated mayhem, setting 2 fires, throwing Molotov cocktails, and firing at police. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder is set to arrive in the riot-hit city of Ferguson on Wednesday to lead the federal government's probe on the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. In a separate development, another young African-American man was shot and killed by St. Louis police not far from Ferguson after reportedly brandishing a knife at officers.
Now, over the summer, we've been seeing numerous musicals take stages throughout the country, and the Sejong Center is one of the venues, of course. Definitely one place to be where it's indoors and well air-conditioned. Well, but before the end of the vacation season, there are a couple of more places you might want to check out. Our Im Yoon-hee gives us a sneak peek.
The Italian classical composer comes back to life on the musical stage. A pivotal figure in the development of 18th century operas, Antonio Salieri taught some of the most famous musicians of all time, including Schubert, Beethoven, and Liszt. But throughout history, the classical composer has been hidden beneath the shadow of Mozart, his arch-rival. Now, the story of Salieri and his musical career comes into the spotlight as a dynamic and engaging performance. Also at the Sejong Center, for 2 nights only at the Grand Theater, one of the most beloved operas is set to take the stage. A collaboration between Korea's Seoul Opera and Italy's Rome Opera House, Tosca is one of Puccini's most performed tragic operas. It's a story about love and death, and the captivating opera singer Tosca, who falls in love with the artist Cavaradossi. Tragedy awaits this plot of love and jealousy, a performance being put on by the experienced and talented Italian artistic team, along with some of Korea's top opera singers. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Well, a wise man once said, when it rains, get wet. But personally, I think I've been getting wet enough, and although as much as many ladies love to shine the rain boots and raincoats and whatnot, but I think a lot of people are a little bit tired of the rain. We are hoping for some more sunshine, but the looks of it, more rain is on the way.
Well, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for the latest weather forecast. Michelle.
Good evening. Now, we had a very cloudy day here in the nation's capital, but luckily it wasn't a rainy one. Now, southern regions weren't quite as lucky as us, and it looks like the heavy rain there will continue throughout the night, while we can expect some light drizzles in Seoul. Now, tomorrow, nationwide rain is in the forecast. Now, the rain will clear out tomorrow afternoon for the southern regions, but it will continue until Friday afternoon for the central region and some regions in Gangwon province. Now, the amount of rain that's expected to fall in Seoul could top to 200 millimeters, and between 50 and 150 millimeters are expected in the southern region. So for those of you driving, please be extra careful on the roads. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out the Thursday morning at 21 before reaching up to 24 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will top out at 28 and 27 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju then tops over to 28, while Dokdo and Mangkungang tops into the low 20s. Well, that's all for Korea. Now here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we could squeeze into this newscast. Thank you for staying with us. To our viewers in different time zones, have a wonderful day. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung. For those of you in Korea, have a great rest of the evening. Daniel and I will be back tomorrow, same time.